Okay, so you guys know that I like to film these things outside by now. Still the same outside that I'm usually in. I like to film outside, and it's currently raining. So you're probably like, he's not going to teach in the rain. But I have like I have like a deck up here that's going to protect me, and so I'm still going to continue to teach even in the rain or shine or whatever. I'm going to keep teaching. I really like. I'm very depressed about not being around my students. Because I like to be in a room full of students and not at my house talking into my phone. But I still feel like this is a better job than everybody else's job, because at least I get to make. I preferred it when I could teach people about my favorite books, but I will settle for making YouTube videos about my favorite books. So let's finish. I was gonna quit, and then I was just like, you know what? I gotta finish the Sydney. Sorry, I should also point out a lot of these videos are being filmed on the same day because of crazy English department rules that I don't want to talk about. So I keep changing my clothes so that you'll think it's a different day. I don't know why, because I'm telling you it's the same day, so I should just stay in the same outfit. But it's like a symbol. It's symbolic days. I'm in a different shirt today. So what I want to talk about next is Sydney and the final paragraph in Sydney. Sydney's final paragraph, the final paragraph I have here for you, contains one of the most famous sentences in the history of the philosophy of art. It is one of the most famous statements, and it is a statement that is designed to directly attack Plato. You notice that Sydney, by the way, isn't talking a ton about reality, but he's disagreeing with Plato, and Plato's talking about reality, and so I put Sydney in the art and reality section for that reason. So he wants to mention, so he's been mentioning lists of things that people complain about poetry. And one of the big objections people have against poetry is it's just filled with lies. It's all lies. That's Plato. Plato was the one who said poetry tells lies. Like the shadows on the cave wall mislead people. They seem like real things, but they're not real things. They're tricks. They're not even really real. People have said, and Plato also said, poetry was filled with lies and nonsense, and it shouldn't be trusted. Because Plato, of course, Plato's a philosopher, and his whole thing is the search after the truth. And for him, something that gives you lies is not going to get you at the truth. Sydney has an interesting kind of defense of this. Remember, this is his defense of poetry. This is defense against Plato. Plato said poetry is full of lies and it's bullshit, and Sydney says, let me fight with Plato about this. So let's take a look at what Sydney says in the very final piece here. So he says to the second, meaning the second objection, that's the one, that they should all be principal liars. This is the second objection, is that poets are the principal liars, meaning they're primarily all lies. This is really interesting, Sydney's answer. I answer paradoxically, but truly, I think truly, that of all writers under the sun, the poet is the least liar. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's a strange thing to say. Because don't poets just make stuff up? And Sydney says, no. Actually, poetry, of all the different writers, poetry is the least liar. Let's find out why he says that. He admits it's a paradox. He admits it's a paradox. And it's a little crazy for him to say that, because poets are very famous for just making stuff up for their poems. But he says they're least liar. And this is interesting. Though he would, as a poet can scarcely be a liar. It's interesting. He says, actually, if you think about it, it's impossible for poets to lie. This is a very interesting defense. Plato said all poets are liars. And Sydney says, no, they're not. And also, it's impossible for poets to lie. And remember, this is the art and reality unit. What Plato was objecting is that poets tell lies about reality. And Sydney says, not possible. Not possible. Let's see why. And this is one of the most famous passages in all of literature. The astronomer with his cousin, the geometrician, meaning like just math. The astronomer with his cousin, the geometrician, can hardly escape when they take upon them to measure the height of the stars. How often, think you, do the physicians lie when they aver things good for sickness, which afterwards send Charon a great number of souls drowned in a potion before they come to his ferry? I think it's actually Karen, but I always feel silly calling this person Karen. But this is the ferryman of the dead who takes people's souls to hell or whatever. So he says, listen, astronomers and people that do geometry, they try to measure the height of the stars, they get things wrong. Also, physicians, right? Doctors, they lie because they tell you something's good for sickness and it ends up getting their patients killed. And no less for the rest of which take upon them to affirm. Because they claim to affirm. They claim things are true. So he says, listen, the astronomer, the guy that does geometry, I can't pronounce this word, and the doctor, the medical doctor, he says they all claim things are true and they all get stuff wrong. So those are your liars, right? When somebody says something is true and it's not true, they lied. right? So if they say, oh, the stars are this many miles away from Earth, and if it turns out they're wrong, then they lied. If the physician says something is good and it turns out to be wrong, he lied. And you're dead probably because you took a potion that killed you. This is, the medicine in the Renaissance was like not the best. So here we get to the most famous sentence in the history of philosophy of art. Here we go. Here's the sentence. You underline this. If you have a physical copy of this, underline it. Now for the poet. So here's why the poet is different from the guy that does geometry and the astronomer and the doctor. He says the poet, he nothing affirms and therefore never lies. For, as I take it, to lie is to affirm something to be true which is false. And as with the other artists, and especially the historian, affirming many things can, in the cloudy knowledge of mankind, hardly escape from many lies. But the poet, as I said before, never affirms. So he says the poet, because the poet never affirms, he can never lie. It's a really interesting argument. As he says, listen, the doctor will tell you something's true, and if it's wrong, that's a lie. And the astronomer and the mathematician will make claims, and they will be wrong, and they will lie. He says, even the historian, they do their best, but the historian says, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. You got to think, historians are often wrong, but poets can never be wrong because they never affirm. Meaning poetry doesn't claim to tell you the truth, and so you can't call it lies. It's fiction. Chill out. Totally different thing. And this is interesting because he says his definition of lying, right, is when you try to say something that's true, when you could say something true, and instead you say something false. He says poets not like that because poets, it's fiction. Poets are writing fictional things, and so they never say something's true, and therefore they cannot lie because they're not claiming to tell the truth. The only people that can lie is if they say this is true and it's not. The poet's not saying this is true. The poet's just making stuff up, and for that reason, Plato should stop yelling at poets because Plato said all poets were liars, and he says no, they're not. They're fiction writers, and fiction is not the same thing as lies, because a lie is designed to trick you. And with fiction, you know right up front it's not real. If you go see a book in a bookstore and it says fiction on it, they're telling you right there it's not real. So it's not like you're going to get home and you're going to be like, I can't believe I'm going to Facebook friend this Harry Potter guy. And then you're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe Harry Potter isn't real. I'm so mad this lady lied to me in her book. It's not, it's a totally different thing. So let's wrap up the Spencer. The poet never makes any circles about your imagination to conjure you to believe for true what he writes. So he's not trying to make you think it's true. The poet cites not authorities of other histories, but even for his entry calls the sweet muses to inspire him to good invention. He invents stuff. So it's not like historians have to look at real history that actually existed, but the poet wants the gods to inspire him to good inventions. It's in truth not laboring to tell you what is or is not, but what should or should not be. I really like that. This poetry doesn't tell you what is or is not. It tells you what should or should not be. Right? That this guy's a bad guy and he should not exist. Captain America is a hero and he should exist, and Thanos is a bad guy and he should not exist. That's a totally separate thing. And he goes on here. He has some examples here. And therefore, though he recount things not true, yet because he tells them not for true, he lies not. Right? He didn't say they were true, and so he can't be called a liar. And then he lists off some stuff from the Bible. Aesop's fables. That's a good one. I think None So Simple would say that Aesop lied in the Tales of the Beasts. So if you know the story about the tortoise and the hare, where there was a race between the rabbit and the turtle, and the rabbit was fast, but he was so confident, he just sat around and did nothing, and then the turtle, slow and steady, wins the race. Nobody thinks that's true. Everybody knows that's just made up. The lesson can be valuable. But the Aesop, I'm thinking, oh boy, I'd love to meet that turtle. It's not a real turtle, dude. It's a story. Chill out. Cool. So I think I'm going to wrap this up in the next video. This is pretty much the end of Sydney. I may spend 2 more minutes on Sydney, and then we're going to start our next philosopher. So I will see you in the next video.